Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're diving into the fascinating world of science.
That's right.
We're going to be exploring how scientific inquiry works,
Yeah.
how it all works in practice.
Exactly.
So get ready for some aha moments as we unpack the definition of science.
Yes.
We'll be looking at the scientific method and the distinction between scientific laws and theories,
It's going to be great.
all without getting bogged down in jargon.
That's the goal.
So to kick things off, what exactly is science?
Well, science is a systematic way of exploring the natural world.
Okay.
It's about observing, experimenting, and measuring.
Right.
It's about constantly refining our understanding of the world around us.
I see.
Like, think about those incredible breakthroughs like vaccines or our understanding of DNA.
Yeah.
It's all made possible through this systematic approach.
That's what I find so fascinating about science.
Uh-huh.
It's always evolving.
Yeah.
It's not about being right or wrong.
Exactly.
It's about getting closer to the truth through testing and refining our ideas.
You got it.
So speaking of testing and refining, let's talk about the scientific method.
Okay.
It's a framework that guides this process of discovery.
Right.
So can you walk us through the steps involved?
Sure. So it all starts with an observation. You notice something interesting,
Okay.
and then curiosity kicks in, and you ask a question about it.
Right.
Based on those observations, you formulate a hypothesis,
Okay.
a testable explanation.
So it's like an educated guess.
Precisely.
Right.
Then you make a prediction.
I see.
If your hypothesis is true, then what would you expect to see?
Yeah.
Then you design and conduct an experiment to test that prediction.
This is where things get really interesting.
Yeah, but it's not just about doing any experiment. You have to design it carefully.
Right.
Making sure you're testing what you intend to test. And that means controlling variables.
Variables.
Yeah, can you remind us about the different types of variables?
Yes.
And why they are so important?
Please.
So you have your independent variable, the factor you deliberately change.
Right.
Then you have your dependent variable, the factor you're measuring in response to those changes.
Okay.
And finally, you have controlled variables.
Yes.
These are the factors you keep constant throughout the experiment.
I see.
To make sure you're isolating the effect of the independent variable.
So let's say we are studying the effect of fertilizer on plant growth.
Okay.
The amount of fertilizer would be the independent variable,
Yes.
and the plant's height would be the dependent variable.
Uh-huh.
But to make sure we're seeing the actual effect of the fertilizer,
Right.
we need to keep things like the amount of sunlight,
Exactly.
the water, and the soil type consistent for each plant.
Those are your controlled variables.
Got it.
By keeping those consistent, you can be more confident that any difference in growth is due to the fertilizer and not some other factor.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like isolating the one thing you're trying to study.
Good.
And eliminating all those other potential influences.
Exactly.
Now, hypotheses,
Okay.
they're not set in stone, are they?
No, they're not.
It seems like they would need to be flexible and evolve as we'd gather more information.
Absolutely. Hypotheses are dynamic.
Okay.
And they're constantly being tested, challenged, and refined.
So how do scientists ensure that their hypotheses are robust enough to be tested and potentially disproven?
That's where testability and falsifiability come in.
Okay.
A good hypothesis needs to be framed in a way that allows us to design an experiment that could potentially prove it wrong.
Right.
This is often done using an if-then format.
I see.
For example, if I increase the temperature of this solution, then the reaction rate will also increase.
Okay, that's clear.
Right.
Yeah. What happens if the results of the experiment don't support the initial hypothesis?
That's where the iterative nature of science really shines. It's not a failure.
Right.
It's an opportunity to learn and revise your thinking. You go back, you re-examine your data and refine your hypothesis based on what you've learned.
So even negative results are valuable in science.
Absolutely. They provide valuable insights
Okay.
and can lead to new avenues of inquiry.
So like a constant process of testing, refining, and getting closer to a more accurate understanding.
You got it.
I love how science embraces that element of uncertainty.
Right.
And uses it to fuel further exploration.
Yeah.
Now, even with a well-designed experiment, I imagine there are still ways things can go wrong.
Oh, there are definitely things that can affect an experiment.
Like what?
Well, we need to talk about systems of measurement.
Okay, so why are systems of measurement so important?
Well, imagine trying to compare the results of experiments conducted in different parts of the world.
Yeah.
If everyone is using different units.
Right.
It would be chaos.
That makes sense.
That's why we have the International System of Units.
Okay, the SI.
Exactly.
Can you remind us why it's the gold standard?
Sure. So the SI is a decimal system
Okay.
based on multiples of 10.
Uh-huh.
So conversions are really simple.
Easy.
Yeah, it has 7 base units.
Right.
Like the meter for length, the kilogram for mass, and the second for time.
Okay.
All other units are derived from these.
Got it.
So it ensures consistency and
Right.
makes it easy to communicate and compare results.
So it's like a universal language for measurement.
Exactly.
Okay, that sounds much more streamlined than other systems.
It is.
So we've talked about designing experiments
Uh-huh.
and using standardized measurements.
Right.
What about communicating those findings?
Well, that's where lab reports come in.
Yeah, I remember writing lab reports back in school.
Oh, yeah.
They always felt like such a tedious task.
They can be.
But I can see now why they're important.
Absolutely. They're crucial.
For transparency and sharing knowledge.
You got it.
So can you break down what makes a good lab report?
Yeah. A well-written lab report provides a detailed account of the experiment.
Okay.
Starting with a clear title and introduction.
Okay.
Stating the purpose of the research.
Right.
And the initial hypothesis.
Like laying the groundwork.
Exactly.
Then comes the recipe part.
Uh-huh.
Listing all the ingredients for the scientific discovery.
You're talking about the materials section.
Yes.
You need to list everything used in the experiment.
Okay.
So that other scientists can replicate your work.
Got it.
Think of it as a detailed recipe
Right.
for a scientific breakthrough.
That level of detail is so crucial for others to verify results.
It is.
And build upon that research.
Absolutely.
And then you describe the steps you...
Yes, that's called the procedure section.
Okay.
It provides a step-by-step guide
I see.
so that anyone can follow your experiment.
It all seems so meticulous.
It is.
I'm guessing presenting the data clearly is also important.
Oh, absolutely.
How do scientists do that?
Well, the results section is where you present the data.
Right.
And charts, graphs, and tables, so
Right.
your best friends here.
Right.
They let you showcase those findings in a visually appealing way.
Okay, what comes after the data is presented?
The conclusion.
Okay.
This is where you summarize your findings,
Right.
discuss whether your hypothesis was supported, and acknowledge any limitations or errors.
I see.
It's about drawing meaningful conclusions.
So it's not just about stating the results.
No.
It's about analyzing what they mean.
Exactly.
And their implications.
Yes.
And of course, no lab report would be complete without proper citations.
It's so important.
Citing sources is about giving credit where credit is due, acknowledging the work of others,
Yes.
and avoiding plagiarism.
Right.
But it's also more than that, right?
Absolutely. Citations are crucial for transparency.
Okay.
It allows others to trace the origins of your information.
Right, like a trail of breadcrumbs.
Yeah.
Leading back to the original source.
Exactly.
Okay, so it strengthens the credibility of your work.
Yes. And speaking of ensuring quality and validity, let's talk about peer review.
Okay, peer review seems like such a critical step.
It is.
Can you explain how it works?
Sure. So before a research paper is published,
Okay.
it undergoes a rigorous evaluation by other experts in the field.
I see.
This process is called peer review.
Okay.
And it acts as a quality control mechanism.
So it's like a panel of scientists scrutinizing your work
Exactly.
before it's released.
It helps filter out unreliable research,
Okay.
ensuring that only the most robust and credible findings are published.
And this also benefits the individual researchers, too.
Absolutely.
How so?
Peer reviewers provide feedback to the authors,
Okay.
helping them to improve their work.
That's so valuable
Is
to have that feedback from other experts.
Exactly.
This has been so insightful. We've covered so much.
we-
From the definition of science to the scientific method,
Right.
systems of measurement,
Yeah.
lab reports, and even peer review.
It's amazing how it all works together.
It is. It's amazing to see how all these elements work together to drive scientific progress.
It is a beautiful system.
Before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to circle back to the idea of applying scientific thinking to everyday life.
Yes.
Because it's one thing to talk about science in a lab setting.
Right.
But I'm curious to see how these principles can be applied to the situations we face daily.
Absolutely. The beauty of science is that it's not just confined to labs and research papers.
Right.
It's a way of thinking that we can all use.
You're right. It's about approaching everyday situations with curiosity.
Exactly.
With a healthy dose of skepticism.
Yes.
And a commitment to seeking evidence.
That's what we're going to be exploring in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, so stay tuned for part 2, where we'll be discussing how to apply scientific thinking to everyday life.
That's going to be great.
And how to become more discerning consumers of information.
Yeah, in a world overflowing with claims and counterclaims.
I can't wait.
Welcome back.
I'm excited for this.
Ready to see how the scientific method can power up your everyday life?
Absolutely.
I think a lot of people think of science as something that's just for labs.
Yeah.
But it can really help you in your daily life.
Give me an example.
Well, let's say your bicycle gets a flat tire.
Okay.
Instead of getting frustrated, you can put on your scientific thinking cap.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Walk me through it.
First, you observe.
Okay.
Don't just glance at the flat tire. Really examine it.
Okay.
Where exactly is the puncture?
Right.
What caused it?
Okay.
Was it a sharp object?
Yeah.
Was it wear and tear?
I see.
Then you start asking questions.
Okay.
What kind of puncture is it? Do I need a new inner tube?
Right.
Can I patch this one?
This is the scientific method.
It's exactly. You're forming hypotheses based on your knowledge of bikes.
Okay.
You might think if it's a small puncture, then a patch kit should work.
Right.
That's your prediction.
So then I grab my patch kit.
Yeah.
I follow the instructions. That's the experiment.
Right.
And if the tire holds air,
yeah,
hypothesis supported.
Exactly. What if the patch doesn't work? Or the tire keeps losing air?
Okay.
Then you revise your thinking.
Right, like a scientist.
Exactly. Maybe the puncture is bigger than you thought.
Yeah.
Or there's another issue. So new hypothesis.
Okay.
Maybe a trip to the bike shop.
I love that.
Right.
It takes the frustration out of it.
Yeah.
Turns it into a process of discovery.
You got it. And this applies to so many things.
Oh, I know.
Like troubleshooting tech issues.
Yeah.
Why your sourdough starter isn't bubbly.
It really is a great way to approach problems.
The scientific method is all about being systematic.
Okay.
Testing your assumptions.
Right.
Being open to adjusting based on evidence.
It makes you a better thinker.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've seen how useful the scientific method is. But what about those terms?
Yeah.
Scientific law.
Right.
Scientific theory.
A lot of people get those mixed up.
I know, I do sometimes.
People think a theory is just a less proven version of a law.
Right.
But that's not true.
Okay, so let's clear this up.
Yeah.
What exactly is a scientific law?
A scientific law describes a pattern in nature.
Okay.
It tells us what happens under certain conditions.
Okay.
A good example is Newton's law of universal gravitation.
Okay.
It describes how objects with mass attract each other.
Right.
We can predict the force of attraction.
Yeah.
But it doesn't tell us why gravity works that way.
So a law is like a rule of the universe.
Yeah, exactly.
That we observe again and again.
It's reliable, predictable. Often a mathematical equation.
I see. Now, what about a scientific theory?
A scientific theory explains why we see those patterns.
Okay.
It gets into the mechanisms, the processes, the relationships, like the theory of evolution.
Okay.
It explains how life changes
Right.
through things like natural selection, genetic variation. There's tons of evidence from fossils, DNA observations of populations.
Wow. Okay. So a law describes what happens.
Yeah.
And a theory explains why.
You got it.
I get it now.
And a theory is not just a guess.
Okay.
It's based on evidence.
Right.
And has been rigorously tested.
That makes sense.
Both laws and theories
Yeah.
are so important to science.
I agree. They work together to give us this comprehensive picture
Yes.
of the natural world.
Exactly.
Okay, so before we wrap up this part,
Okay.
I want to go back to the idea of applying scientific thinking to everyday life. Like you mentioned, being a more discerning consumer of information.
That's so important.
Yeah, especially with the internet.
It can be so overwhelming.
Yeah. How can we avoid all that misinformation?
The key is asking the right questions.
Okay.
Like imagine you see a headline
Uh-huh.
about some new miracle supplement.
Okay.
Put on your scientist hat
Right.
and start digging deeper.
So question the source.
Yes. Who's making this claim?
Okay.
Are they credible?
Uh-huh.
Do they have a bias?
Right. So like doing a background check.
Exactly. Look for information from reputable sources, like scientific organizations, universities, government agencies.
Peer-reviewed journals.
Yes, because they've gone through that peer review process.
Right. Okay, so what about the evidence itself?
Look for specific details about the research.
Okay.
How was the study conducted?
Yeah.
How many people participated?
Okay.
Was there a control group?
So you have to look deeper.
Yes, don't just read the headline.
Right. And what about anecdotal evidence?
Be wary of that.
Like personal stories?
Yes. Just because someone had a good experience doesn't mean it's scientifically proven.
I know we see that a lot online.
Yes. Another thing to keep in mind is to consider other explanations.
Okay.
Even if a study finds a correlation, it doesn't mean one thing caused the other.
Give me an example.
Okay, so let's say a study finds a correlation between ice cream sales and crime rates.
So ice cream causes crime.
Of course not.
Okay, good.
There's probably another explanation.
Like what?
Maybe both ice cream sales and crime rates go up during summer.
Right.
So the heat might be the real driver.
Okay, that's a much better explanation.
Right.
Yeah, it shows how important it is to think critically.
Don't jump to conclusions. No. Look at the bigger picture.
Consider all the variables.
Yeah.
Okay, so how can we apply this to health decisions?
When it comes to your health, it's so important to be careful.
Right, there's so much information out there.
Yeah, don't believe everything you read.
Okay.
Talk to your doctor.
Right.
Look for evidence-based recommendations.
So be proactive.
Exact.
Take charge of your health decisions.
And remember, scientific knowledge is always evolving.
Right.
So stay curious.
Okay.
Keep learning. Be open to updating your understanding.
I like that.
We've got this mental toolkit now for navigating the world.
We can evaluate information, make decisions, solve problems. It's all about that scientific spirit.
Exactly.
Curiosity, skepticism.
And the pursuit of truth.
It's a journey that can lead to a deeper understanding
of ourselves and the world.
Okay, so much to think about.
Yes.
Before we get into part 3.
I know, right?
Welcome back to the Deep Dive.
It's great to be back.
We've been on quite a journey.
Yeah, exploring the world of science.
From the scientific method to the difference between laws and theories.
It's all connected.
And we've seen how these principles can be used in our everyday lives.
It's not just for scientists.
Exactly. It's about thinking critically.
Yeah.
Asking the right questions. Evaluating the evidence.
It's a powerful way to approach the world.
So can we get even more practical?
Sure.
Can you give us some real-world scenarios where we can put these skills to work?
Let's talk about online information.
Okay.
We see so much stuff online.
It's overwhelming.
How do we avoid all the misinformation out there?
That's what I want to know.
Well, you see those flashy headlines, promising quick fixes or amazing results.
Right.
Don't take those at face value.
Okay.
Approach them with skepticism.
Good advice.
Ask yourself, who's making this claim?
Right.
What are their credentials?
Yeah. Are they an expert?
Do they have any biases?
So do a background check on the source?
Exactly. Look for information from reputable sources. Scientific organizations, universities, government agencies.
What about peer-reviewed journals?
Yes, those are great because they've gone through that peer review process to ensure quality.
Okay, so then how do we know if the claims are backed up?
You need to look at the evidence.
Okay.
Look for details about the research.
Like what?
How was the study conducted?
Yeah.
How many people were in it?
Okay.
Was there a control group?
So I need to dig deeper.
Exactly. Don't just read the headline.
Right. And what about personal stories?
Yeah, be careful with those.
Okay.
Just because it worked for one person doesn't mean it's scientifically proven.
We see a lot of that online.
Yes. Another important thing is to consider alternative explanations. Like, just because a study finds a correlation doesn't mean one thing caused the other.
Can you explain that a bit more?
Sure. Let's say a study finds a link between ice cream sales and crime rates.
So ice cream causes crime. Okay, good.
There's probably something else going on.
Like what?
Maybe both ice cream sales and crime go up in the summer.
Right.
Because it's hot.
That makes more sense.
Yeah, you have to look at the bigger picture.
Don't jump to conclusions.
Exactly.
So how do we use this when it comes to our health?
Your health is so important.
I agree. There's a lot of information out there.
So be careful.
Okay.
Don't believe everything you read online.
Should I talk to my doctor?
Yes. Always consult with a healthcare professional.
Okay. And look for evidence-based recommendations.
That's right. Be proactive about your health.
Right. Do your research.
And remember, scientific knowledge is always changing.
It's constantly evolving.
Exactly. So keep learning.
Okay. Stay curious.
Be open to new information.
It's like we've been given this amazing toolkit.
We have.
How to navigate the world.
Yeah. Use it to evaluate information.
Make good decisions. And even solve problems.
It's all about that scientific spirit.
Curiosity, skepticism.
The pursuit of truth.
This has been an incredible deep dive.
It has.
Into the fascinating world of science.
It really is fascinating.
Thank you so much for listening.
I hope you enjoyed it.
And we hope this empowers you
to
think more critically about the world around you.
Until next time.
Stay curious.